Picture this, the year is 1888, and we find ourselves in the heart of the Victorian-era London. This is a city of contrasts, a city of paradoxes. Imagine the grandeur of the West End, with its opulent theatres, luxurious shops, and affluent inhabitants. But just a few miles east, a different world unfolds. Welcome to East End London, a place where the sun struggled to penetrate the thick smog and grime. Here the streets were teeming with people, their faces masked by soot and fatigue. The air thick with the smell of poverty and desperation. The homes were cramped, the sanitation deplorable, and the living conditions, well, they were a far cry from the glittering world of the West End. In the midst of this social disparity, the city was buzzing with progress. The Industrial Revolution was in full swing, bringing with it technological advancements, an economic boom, yet also a widening gap between the haves and the have-nots. The rich were getting richer, while the poor were growing in numbers, their plight largely ignored. Amidst this backdrop, law enforcement and public order were in a state of flux. The Metropolitan Police Force, established in the late 1820s, was still finding its feet, grappling with issues of corruption, inefficiency, and a lack of public trust. The East End, in particular, was a challenging terrain for them, a labyrinth of narrow, winding streets and dark alleys, a breeding ground for crime and lawlessness. The cultural climate was just as complex. Victorian morality, with its strict social codes and double standards, was at odds with the reality of life in the East End, where survival often meant bending or breaking these codes. In the midst of this turbulent era, a shadow of terror was about to descend. A nameless predator, who would soon be known as Jack the Ripper, was about to plunge the city into a reign of terror, leaving a trail of unsolved murders that still perplex us to this day. But that, dear listeners, is a story for another moment. In the dark corners of Whitechapel, a malevolent force was at work, known today as Jack the Ripper. The year was 1888, and London's East End was about to become the stage for a series of chilling murders that would baffle investigators for over a century. The first victim, Mary Ann Nichols, was discovered in the early hours of August 31st, her body bearing the brutal signature that would become the Ripper's hallmark. She was not just murdered, she was horrifically mutilated, a grim testament to the killer's savagery. A week later, Annie Chapman met a similar fate. The brutality escalated, the killer leaving behind a tableau of horror that shocked even the seasoned officers of the Metropolitan Police. The murderer was methodical, his surgical precision suggesting a familiarity with the human body that led many to speculate he might be a butcher or a surgeon. The night of September 30th became known as the double event. Elizabeth Stride and Catherine Eddowes were both murdered within hours of each other, their bodies left in gruesome display. Stride's murder was interrupted, her injuries less severe than the others, but Eddowes bore the full brunt of the Ripper's ferocity, her body mutilated beyond recognition. The final victim, Mary Jane Kelly, was found on November 9th. Her murder was the most gruesome of them all, the brutality of the attack far surpassing the previous killings. The Ripper had taken his time, the room where Kelly was found a testament to the killer's sadistic tendencies. In each case, the Ripper struck quickly, silently, and with a precision that left little evidence behind. The victims were all women of the night, all living in the squalor of the East End. The murders were random, yet deliberate, the killer's modus operandi consistent throughout. The city was gripped with fear, a killer was on the loose. And yet, despite the terror he instilled, Jack the Ripper would vanish as suddenly as he appeared, leaving behind a mystery that continues to perplex us to this day. As the body count rose, the constabulary was under immense pressure to apprehend the culprit. The investigation into the horrific crimes attributed to Jack the Ripper was a monumental task for the law enforcement of the time, to say the least. Victorian-era London police force was ill-prepared for a villain of such a brutal and elusive nature. The detectives involved, among them Inspector Frederick Aberline, Sergeant William Thick and Chief Inspector Donald Swanson, were seasoned professionals, yet they found themselves facing an adversary unlike any they had encountered before. Their methods were rudimentary by today's standards, relying heavily on door-to-door inquiries and handwritten notes. With no DNA testing, no fingerprinting, and no surveillance footage, they were essentially navigating in the dark. The lack of modern forensic science was a significant hurdle, But they pressed on, determined to bring the perpetrator to justice. The investigation was riddled with challenges. The crime scenes were often contaminated by curious onlookers before the police could secure them. The victims, all women of the night, led complex lives that were difficult to untangle. The East End's labyrinth-like streets provided the perfect cover for the killer to strike and then disappear without a trace. There were, however, some leads. Letters, purportedly from the killer himself, flooded police stations and newsrooms. Among them was the infamous From Hell letter, accompanied by half a human kidney, a grim trophy that sent shivers down the spine of Victorian London. But were these communications authentic, or merely the work of opportunistic hoaxers? The question added another layer of complexity to the already baffling case. Suspects were questioned, and some were even held under surveillance, but to no avail. The detectives were always a step behind, chasing shadows in the foggy alleyways of Whitechapel. The elusive nature of the killer, combined with the limitations of the era's investigative techniques, created a seemingly insurmountable challenge. Despite their best efforts, the elusive killer remained a step ahead. The name Jack the Ripper became a synonym for the unsolvable, a spectre that haunted London long after the murders ceased. The heinous crimes of Jack the Ripper were not just a series of murders, they had a far-reaching impact on society. These acts of brutality sent shockwaves through the heart of London, and indeed, the world. The fear and paranoia that swept the city streets were palpable, altering the way people lived their lives. The feeling of safety, once taken for granted, was replaced with dread and suspicion. The media of the time played a significant role in shaping the public's perception. Newspapers were awash with sensational headlines, each more lurid than the last. The press, relishing in the grim details of each murder, painted a chilling picture of a ruthless killer stalking the streets of Whitechapel under the cover of darkness. This relentless media attention did more than just spread fear, it created a frenzy. The hunger for news was insatiable. Every new development, every whisper of a lead, was seized upon and dissected by the public. The press had tapped into the public's morbid fascination, and the name Jack the Ripper became a regular feature in households across the country. The portrayal of the murders in newspapers was not just about selling copies, though. It was about exposing the harsh realities of life in the East End. It laid bare the stark contrast between the opulence of the West End and the squalor and desperation of the East. It cast a harsh light on the plight of the working poor, particularly women, who were the most vulnerable and the most neglected by society. Sensational journalism, while often criticized for its lack of restraint, played a crucial role in shaping public opinion. It stirred up a sense of urgency and forced those in power to take notice. It led to calls for reform and eventually changes in legislation. The Ripper had not just claimed victims, he had altered the very fabric of society. His reign of terror marked a turning point in how society viewed crime, law enforcement, and social inequality. It was a grim reminder of the darkness that lurks beneath the surface when desperation meets disregard. Jack the Ripper may have faded into the annals of history, but the impact of his crimes continues to reverberate to this day. Over the years, numerous names have been linked to the infamous Jack the Ripper. The list of suspects reads like a who's who of Victorian-era London, each with their own intriguing story and possible motive. First, let's talk about Montague John Druitt. A barrister by trade and an assistant schoolmaster on the side, Druitt's own family suspected him of the heinous crimes. They believed his suicide, a mere month after the last Ripper murder, was an admission of guilt. However, lack of solid evidence keeps him in the realm of speculation. Then there's Aaron Kosminski. A Polish immigrant living in Whitechapel at the time of the murders, Kosminski was said to have a violent hatred of women. He was committed to an insane asylum shortly after the last murder, and some modern DNA analyses have tried to link him to one of the crime scenes. However, these findings remain controversial. Francis Tumblety, an American quack doctor, also finds himself on the list. Known for his flamboyant character and his misogynistic tendencies, Tumblety had been arrested for other crimes around the same time as the Ripper murders. Interestingly, he fled to the United States shortly after the last murder, leading some to speculate that he was in fact our elusive killer. Other suspects include James Maybrick, a cotton merchant whose diary surfaced in the late 20th century confessing to the murders, and Thomas Cutbush, a medical student with a violent past, among others. The truth is, each suspect brings their own compelling narrative to the table, but none provide the definitive proof needed to close this chilling chapter of history. The lack of concrete evidence and the passage of time have made it nearly impossible to definitively identify the man behind the myth. Yet the identity of the Ripper remains shrouded in mystery. A shadowy figure lurking in the foggy alleyways of our collective imagination, forever etched into the annals of true crime. With the advent of modern forensic science, the Ripper case has been revisited numerous times. The enduring mystery of Jack the Ripper has remained a topic of great intrigue, drawing in a host of expert investigators, historians, and even amateur sleuths. In the late 20th century, a new field of study emerged, known as Ripperology. This dedicated endeavor to unravel the Ripper's identity has brought forth an array of theories, some of which have employed cutting-edge scientific methodologies. One such approach was the use of geographic profiling, a tool often used in modern criminology. This technique, when applied to the Ripper case, suggested that the murderer most likely resided within the area of the killings, a theory that aligns with the principles of modern criminology. Additionally, in the early 21st century, DNA testing was performed on a shawl reportedly found at the murder scene of Catherine Eddowes, one of the Ripper's victims. The results pointed towards Aaron Kosminski, a Polish barber and one of the original suspects. However, the validity of this evidence has been widely disputed due to the potential for contamination over the years. In the realm of psychological profiling, some have speculated that the Ripper may have been a woman, based on the killer's intimate knowledge of the female anatomy and the ease with which she could have moved in the shadows of Whitechapel without arousing suspicion. This theory, however, remains controversial and is far from universally accepted. Despite these advancements and the relentless efforts of investigators, the case of Jack the Ripper remains shrouded in uncertainty. Each new theory or piece of evidence seems to raise more questions than it answers, further deepening the mystery. The enduring fascination with the case is a testament to its enigmatic nature, a puzzle that has captivated the world for over a century. As we continue to apply modern investigative techniques to this historic case, we inch closer to potentially unmasking the identity of this infamous figure. However, until that day comes, despite these advancements, the case remains an unsolved enigma. The name Jack the Ripper has transcended the annals of crime to become a fixture of popular culture. His legacy is one that has been immortalized in various forms of media, spanning from the written word to the silver screen. In the world of literature, the Ripper's tale has been told and retold countless times. From the detective novels of the late 19th century to the modern thrillers of today, the enigma of Jack the Ripper continues to captivate readers across the globe. His story has inspired not only works of fiction but also countless non-fiction accounts that attempt to dissect the case and offer fresh insights into the killer's identity. On the silver screen, the Ripper's tale has been adapted into numerous films and television series, portraying the eerie streets of Victorian London and the chilling nature of the murders. These adaptations have presented a myriad of interpretations, each offering a unique take on the infamous killer and his gruesome spree. Beyond books and films, the legacy of Jack the Ripper extends to the realm of tourism. The gloomy alleyways and dimly lit streets of East End London have become a magnet for those intrigued by the macabre. Guided tours trace the steps of the killer, recounting the chilling tales of the canonical 5 victims, and immersing participants in the eerie atmosphere of Victorian-era London. Moreover, Jack the Ripper's influence permeates the crime genre itself. He's become the archetype of the faceless, elusive killer, a spectre that haunts the collective consciousness. The mystery surrounding his identity and the unsolved nature of his crimes have become a blueprint for countless crime narratives. In the end, Jack the Ripper has become more than a murderer. He has become a legend. His legacy continues to intrigue and terrify, a testament to the enduring fascination with the darker side of human nature. The name Jack the Ripper, once a byword for fear in the foggy streets of London, is now a symbol of the unsolved and the unknown in the annals of crime. After more than a century, the identity of Jack the Ripper remains a haunting question. Why has this case remained unsolved, you ask? Well, let's delve into the reasons. In the late 1800s, forensic technology was in its infancy. Fingerprints were not yet in use, DNA was unheard of, and the concept of a crime scene was not fully understood. Crucial evidence was likely lost, either through mishandling or simply due to the passage of time. Additionally, the sheer volume of conflicting eyewitness accounts, coupled with the lack of solid leads, created a confusing puzzle that investigators of the time struggled to piece together. And while modern advancements have shed light on some aspects of the case, they've also deepened the enigma, adding new layers of complexity to an already baffling mystery. And so, the tale of Jack the Ripper remains a chilling unsolved mystery, echoing through the corridors of time.